Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's just great to see so many familiar faces, and I remembered a lot of the work that we were able to do together when I had the privilege of serving as chairman of the FCC during the Clinton administration. We meet today at a really important time for the country and the world. Elections are wonderful events because they are a natural breakpoint when people step back and think about what's happened and how to plan for the future. And I commend Julia for pulling this event together at a really important time and getting all of you here. It's a wonderful, wonderful assembly of people. It also got me thinking about sort of where are we in telecommunications policy and markets at this particular time. We are obviously in very turbulent times in our country. The election is taking place at a time of incredible, historic economic crisis in our economy that is truly global. We're at war in two hotspots around the world. And I don't think that it has fully settled in with most people how difficult and constrained public policymakers will be operating in an environment where the economy is under such stress. But notwithstanding that, I do think it will be useful and interesting and lots of fun, frankly, in the next couple of days to just take stock of where we are in the march of technology forward. There's so much talk about broadband now, and it's quite exciting. But it's also useful to think about where we are in historical perspective. Having chaired the FCC at a really interesting time, I have become somewhat of a student of technology revolutions of the past. And it's really interesting to study what happens when technologies enter the public marketplace, become a part of the public lexicon. There seems to be, with most technological innovations, three distinct phases. First, there's boom time, when there is huge excitement about technology. And then oftentimes that creates a lot of speculation, overinvestment in the marketplace, and then there's the inevitable crash, the bust. And then you enter into a different period where you have more of a renaissance, a rebirth, if you will, when the technology becomes integrated into businesses and homes and increases productivity and really becomes a part of daily life. That's, I think, where we are today with the broadband revolution. And if you look historically at lots of different technological innovations in our history, you can see these three phases repeated, whether it was the telegraph, which is probably the closest analogy to what we dealt with the internet, with its emergence in the mid-90s, the railroads, the steel industry. All of them have these three distinct phases. The internet's really interesting because there's a great book by Tom Standage called The Victorian Internet, and he draws these wonderful analogies to the internet of the 19th century and the internet of today. And he talks about telegraph entrepreneurs who thought that they had changed business models, changed the world as we know it. And it reminds me of the folks who used to come and see us at the FCC during that time, Michael. These 30-something billionaires who would talk about how they had changed the rules of the economy. Well, of course, we know that that didn't quite happen. But nevertheless, there are lots of interesting parallels. So where are we with broadband? I do think that certainly the public, at least half of the public who has broadband in their homes, has waken up to the power of this technology. They understand that it makes them more effective, better educated, their children are better educated, and they have a lot of fun with it. And those of us who have it in our lives can't imagine going without it. During my period at the FCC, I really saw the introduction of the narrowband internet into our economy. And that was exciting, heady times. It precipitated this period of overinvestment. Michael, you really saw more of the introduction of broadband deployment, and you saw all of this investment in our domestic networks, really the largest investment in our technology infrastructure of all time. Until recently, it was also represented the greatest loss of debt and equity capital in all times, but I think the banking industry probably has us matched on that. But I do think that now we're in a period of renaissance. The technology is being integrated into the society. People are understanding its power. And at least for me, I think it's an important time for all of us to understand, well, what do we mean by broadband? I've been away from the policy debates a little bit. I don't follow it as closely in my current job, but it's always amazing to me that there's so much discussion about a national broadband policy, but we really haven't defined what broadband means and what we want from broadband in terms of speeds and latency and deployment, et cetera. So I think that's really important for us to think about in the next couple of days. I also think that it's wonderful that we have not only the federal government represented here, but state and local governments, because so much of the important innovation in this area is going to come from the state and local officials and what they do locally. I also, just speaking from my own personal perspective, I'm fairly optimistic about investment in broadband in this country, particularly in urban areas. As an investor, both in telephone companies and cable companies, I am not worried at all about investment pouring into broadband infrastructure in our cities. It's there. I mean, we're seeing huge investments. It's an imperative for cable operators and telephone companies alike to pour money into this infrastructure. What I'm less confident about, two things. One is, have we really explored and really come up with policies that will work to incentivize new broadband pipes into the marketplace? And then second and most importantly, are we doing enough to make sure that people most at risk of being in areas where you don't have broadband, are we thinking enough about their situation? So those are a few questions that I'd like to throw out there. I'm sure we'll be talking about lots of other things.